It was a cold winter evening in Willow Creek, a quiet town in Ohio. The sky was gray, and soft snow covered the streets like a white blanket. Inside a small grocery store, the warm yellow lights made everything feel calm except for one woman standing at the checkout counter. Her name was Sarah Miller. She was in her early 30s, wearing an old blue coat that had seen better days. Her tired eyes told a story of sleepless nights and endless worries. Beside her stood her little boy, Ethan, holding a small carton of milk in his tiny hands. Sarah placed her few groceries on the counter: bread, cereal, milk, and a box of macaroni and cheese. Nothing fancy, just enough to get them through the next few days. She gave a small, polite smile to the cashier, pretending everything was fine. When the cashier scanned the last item, Sarah took out her card and handed it over. But after a few seconds, the machine beeped loudly. Declined. The cashier looked up awkwardly. Maybe try again. Sarah's face turned pale. Her heart started beating fast. She quickly swiped the card again, whispering, "Please, please work." But again, the same sound. Declined. Ethan looked up at his mom, confused. "Mom, is everything okay?" Sarah forced a smile. "Yeah, honey, just a small problem." People in line started watching. Some sighed impatiently. A few whispered. Sarah could feel her cheeks burning with shame. She wanted to disappear. The cashier said softly, "Ma'am, maybe you could remove a few items." Sarah's throat tightened. She looked at the groceries, each one something she needed. But she slowly picked up the milk and placed it aside. Then the bread. Finally, only one small box of cereal remained. She tried the card again. Still declined. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "Mom, we can get the milk next time. It's okay." That was it. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She turned her face away so her son wouldn't see her cry. Then, out of nowhere, a calm voice spoke from behind. "Excuse me, miss. I got this." Sarah turned around. A man in his 40s stood there wearing a simple brown jacket, a kind face, and warm eyes. His name was Michael Adams, though she didn't know that yet. He placed his hand gently on the counter and smiled at the cashier. "How much is the bill?" he asked. $48.20, the cashier said. The man pulled out his wallet and handed over his card without hesitation. Sarah quickly shook her head. No, please don't. I can't let you do that." But the man smiled softly. "It's okay. Everyone needs a little help sometimes." The cashier finished the payment and bagged the groceries. Sarah was speechless. She wanted to say thank you, but the words stuck in her throat. Michael handed her the bags and said quietly, "Just pay it forward someday." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, not from shame, from gratitude. She nodded slowly. "I will. I promise." Before she could ask his name, Michael gave a little nod and walked out into the cold evening. His figure disappeared into the snowy streets, just like a guardian angel fading into the night. Sarah stood there for a moment, frozen not from the cold, but from what had just happened. People around her smiled faintly. The cashier whispered, "That was kind of him." Sarah gathered her groceries, took Ethan's hand, and walked outside. Snowflakes fell on her hair as she looked around, hoping to spot the man, but he was gone. "Mom, who was that man?" Ethan asked. "I don't know," Sarah said softly, "but he's the reason we're eating tonight." As they walked home through the quiet, snowy streets, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about him. Why did he help her? He didn't even know her. He just stepped in without expecting anything in return. When they reached their small apartment, Ethan helped her unpack the groceries. He hummed happily, as if nothing bad had ever happened. But Sarah sat at the table for a while, staring at the receipt in her hand, the one with the total amount of $48.20 written on it. She folded it carefully and placed it inside a small box on a shelf. That box already had a few old photos, Ethan's drawings, and a note that said "Better days ahead." She whispered to herself, "One day I'll return this kindness. I don't know how, but I will." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah stood by the window and watched the snow fall. The city lights reflected on the glass, and for the first time in months, she felt a small spark of hope. She thought about the stranger's words again, "Pay it forward someday." They echoed in her heart like a promise. What she didn't know was that years later, that promise would return to her in a way that would change her life forever. Years passed, and the memory of that snowy night never left Sarah Miller's heart. The world had moved on, but for her, that moment remained frozen in time. The kind stranger's words, "Pay it forward someday," still echoed in her mind every time life got hard. Sarah was no longer the woman who stood helplessly at the grocery counter. She had learned to fight not with anger, but with quiet determination. She took 2 jobs, one as a cashier at a local diner and another cleaning offices at night. Every morning, she'd wake up before sunrise, pack lunch for her son Ethan, and whisper to herself, "Keep going, Sarah. Better days are coming." Life wasn't easy, but it was moving forward. Slowly, step by step. Ethan, now 10 years old, had grown into a cheerful, kind boy, always helping others at school. He often told his mom, "When I grow up, I want to be just like you. You never give up." Those words gave Sarah strength on days when her body wanted to collapse from exhaustion. On weekends, she'd take Ethan to the park, and they'd sit under the old oak tree, sharing ice cream, a small luxury they could finally afford. Sometimes, they would talk about dreams. Ethan's dream was simple: "I just want us to have a house with a big window, Mom. So you can see the sunrise every morning." Sarah smiled every time he said that. A house with a sunrise window, it sounded small, but for her, it was everything. One evening, while cleaning an office building, Sarah saw a notice pinned on the wall. "Volunteers needed at Willow Creek Community Shelter." She paused for a moment, reading the details. They needed help serving food, sorting clothes, and supporting families in need. Her heart warmed at the thought. She remembered him, the man who once helped her without expecting anything in return. Maybe this was her chance to start paying it forward. The next weekend, she showed up at the shelter. It was a simple building filled with people who had lost homes, jobs, and hope, people who looked just like she once did. Sarah greeted everyone with a warm smile and started helping in the kitchen. It felt good, really good. Every plate of food she served reminded her of that night at the grocery store. She realized that kindness didn't need to be big. Sometimes, a meal, a smile, or a kind word could change someone's entire day. Weeks turned into months. Sarah became one of the shelter's most dedicated volunteers. People started to recognize her kindness and gentle nature. One woman told her, "You don't just serve food, Sarah, you serve hope." That line stayed with her. As time passed, Sarah's story began to spread. A local journalist wrote an article titled "From Struggle to Strength: One Mother's Journey of Hope." It featured her photo smiling in the shelter kitchen, surrounded by people she was helping. The story went viral in the small town. People were touched by her journey, how a woman once in need had become a source of light for others. But somewhere across town, in a quiet little apartment, a man sat reading that very same newspaper. His hands trembled slightly as he held the paper. His hair had turned gray, and his face carried lines of time and pain. His name was Michael Adams, the same man who had once paid Sarah's grocery bill years ago. He looked at her picture for a long time, his eyes soft with pride. He whispered to himself, "So she remembered." But Michael's health wasn't what it used to be. He lived alone, with no family around. His body was growing weaker each day. Still, that photo gave him comfort. In his heart, he felt that helping her years ago had meant something not just to her, but to him too. Back at the shelter, Sarah kept working tirelessly. She had become a symbol of hope not just for others, but for herself. Yet, deep inside, she sometimes wondered if she'd ever get the chance to truly repay that kindness. One evening, after closing time, she sat outside the shelter, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with orange and gold, and the air felt calm. She thought about the stranger from years ago. "Wherever you are," she whispered softly, "thank you. I hope life has been kind to you too." The world was quiet, and for a moment, it felt like the universe heard her words. A few days later, a heavy storm hit Willow Creek. Dark clouds covered the sky, and rain poured for hours without stopping. Streets began to flood, and people rushed to find safety. The community shelter became a rescue center overnight, and once again, Sarah was there, helping every person she could. She didn't know it yet, but this storm was about to change everything. It would bring someone back into her life, someone she never thought she'd see again. The storm hit Willow Creek like nothing the town had seen in years. Rain poured in sheets, turning the streets into rivers. Wind howled through the trees, bending their branches and shaking loose leaves that flew like tiny, frantic dancers in the night. Inside the community shelter, the lights flickered as volunteers rushed to help. Families huddled together, clutching wet blankets and small bags with their belongings. Children cried softly, and frightened adults whispered prayers under their breath. Sarah Miller was in the middle of it all. Her hair plastered to her forehead, clothes soaked from helping people through the storm, she didn't stop. She carried food to families, comforted children, and made sure everyone had dry blankets. "Here, take this," she said gently to a trembling little girl. "Thank you," the child whispered, gripping the blanket tightly. Sarah looked around at the chaos and took a deep breath. Despite her exhaustion, she felt a strange sense of calm, almost as if she had been preparing for moments like this her entire life. Outside, the storm grew worse. Floodwater started to rise in the streets, and cars were abandoned, half submerged. The emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Then came the call from the volunteers. "Someone needs immediate help. An elderly man trapped near Oak Street, he's hurt." Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed a flashlight and ran into the storm, carrying a small emergency kit. The rain pelted her face, stinging, but she kept moving. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a strange sense of urgency she couldn't explain. She reached Oak Street, where water had already reached knee level. A figure was struggling against the current, an older man, drenched, shivering, and barely conscious. Sarah's breath caught. She didn't recognize him at first, but something about his posture, the way he held himself, made her heart tighten. She waded into the water, ignoring the cold, and reached him. "Sir! I've got you! Grab my hand," she shouted. The man's hand was weak, barely grasping hers. Sarah pulled with all her strength, her boots slipping in the muddy water. Finally, she dragged him onto the dry curb, sitting him down carefully. The man coughed, water dripping from his hair and clothes. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with concern. He groaned softly and tried to sit up. His eyes fluttered open, tired, worn, but familiar. And then Sarah froze. Something in his face, in his voice, sparked a memory deep in her mind. "Michael," she whispered. The man blinked, confused. I don't know, do I know you?" Sarah's heart pounded. She reached for his wallet, which had been partially submerged in the water. The leather was wet and worn, but when she opened it carefully, her eyes fell on a small, crumpled grocery receipt. Her hand shook. The name of the store, the date it matched that snowy night years ago. Michael Adams, she said softly, tears forming in her eyes. Recognition flashed in his tired eyes. Sarah. It all came flooding back. The grocery store. Ethan. The kind stranger who had changed her life. He was the same man, older, weaker, but the same. Tears blurred her vision as she realized the truth. She was sitting in the rain, holding the hand of the man who had once given her hope when she had nothing. I never forgot what you did, Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. Michael's lips curved into a faint smile. Neither did I. I just didn't know if you would. The rain poured harder, but in that moment, it felt like the world had slowed down just for them. Sarah helped Michael to his feet, supporting him as they slowly made their way back to the shelter. Her mind raced. How had fate brought them together again, in such a storm? By the time they reached safety, Michael was shivering violently. Volunteers wrapped him in blankets and offered warm tea. Sarah stayed by his side, brushing water from his face, holding his hand, making sure he was okay. Through the storm, the irony struck her. The man who had helped her when she was desperate now needed her help. The kindness she had received all those years ago was coming back full circle, but this time, she could return it. As Michael sipped the tea, his eyes met hers. You remembered me, he said quietly. Sarah nodded, her tears falling freely. How could I forget? You saved me when I had nothing. Now, it's my turn to help you. The storm outside raged on, but inside the shelter, there was a warmth that could not be dampened, the warmth of hope, gratitude, and a connection that had survived years of separation. After the storm passed, Willow Creek was quiet once again. The streets were muddy, trees bent under the weight of fallen branches, and puddles reflected the soft morning light. Inside the community shelter, people were slowly returning home, tired but safe. Sarah Miller sat beside Michael Adams, who was now wrapped in a warm blanket. His clothes were dry, and a cup of tea rested in his hands, but his body still trembled from the cold. For the first time, Sarah looked at him closely. The lines on his face, the gray in his hair, and the quiet sadness in his eyes told a story she had never fully imagined. She thought back to the grocery store years ago, the warmth of his smile, the kindness he showed without expecting anything in return. Now, the man who had saved her was in need of her care. Michael looked around the shelter quietly, taking in the activity. Volunteers were helping families with food and blankets. He sighed softly, almost ashamed. I don't have anyone, he admitted quietly. No family, no one to check on me. I live alone, and I've been sick. Sarah's heart tightened. She remembered the fear and helplessness she felt that night when her grocery card was declined. Now, she could feel that same helplessness in him, yet this time, she could act. You're not alone anymore, she said firmly, holding his hand. I'm here, and I'll help you. You don't have to face this alone. Michael blinked, a mix of surprise and gratitude crossing his face. You don't have to. I know, Sarah replied softly. But I want to. You once helped me when I had nothing. Now it's my turn to help you. Over the next few days, Sarah did everything she could to care for Michael. She helped him clean his apartment, arranged his medications, and made sure he ate properly. She even took him to his doctor for a full checkup. Michael's health had declined more than he realized. The doctor explained that he needed regular care and that living alone could be dangerous. Sarah listened carefully, making a plan in her mind. She couldn't leave him to struggle. She wouldn't let him face life alone, not after what he had done for her. As they spent time together, Michael began to open up. He shared small details about his life. He had always tried to help people quietly, without recognition. Kindness, it's all I've ever tried to do, he said softly. I never thought anyone would remember me. Sarah smiled, tears forming in her eyes. I remembered. I never forgot you. And I want to make sure you know your kindness mattered more than you could ever imagine. Michael shook his head slightly, his voice trembling. I feel like I don't deserve this. I've been alone for so long. You do deserve it, Sarah said firmly. Kindness comes back in ways we don't expect. I'm living proof of that. The bond between them grew stronger every day. Michael became like family to Sarah and Ethan. He shared stories of his past, told jokes, and even helped Ethan with his homework. One evening, as the three of them sat together watching the sunset, Ethan looked at Michael with wide eyes. Mom, he asked, is this what you mean by kindness? Helping people even if you don't have to? Sarah nodded, smiling softly. Yes, Ethan. And sometimes, the people we help are the same people who once helped us. Kindness comes back sometimes in ways bigger than we imagine. Michael reached out and gently ruffled Ethan's hair. You're a good kid, Ethan. Your mom is a very special person. Sarah felt warmth in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt a deep sense of peace. The person who had once saved her now saved in a way he never expected. Sarah also realized something important: life wasn't just about surviving. It was about giving, sharing, and caring for others no matter how small the act. The same grocery store act of kindness that once lifted her out of despair now had the power to change another life. She made a quiet promise to herself that night: she would always be there for Michael. She would make sure he never felt alone again. And as Michael rested, sipping his tea and smiling faintly, Sarah understood something profound. Sometimes, the people who touch our hearts are the ones who need us the most, even years later. And when we act with love and kindness, we can change lives not just for a moment, but forever. Months had passed since the storm, and Michael Adams was finally recovering. His health improved slowly, thanks to Sarah's care, the doctor's guidance, and the warmth of a home that no longer felt empty. Sarah Miller had kept her promise. She had not only helped Michael physically, but she had given him the one thing he had longed for most: a family. Ethan, now 12, had grown even closer to Michael. Every morning, they would eat breakfast together, laughing over small jokes and sharing stories from school. Michael had become a grandfather figure to him, teaching him small lessons about life, kindness, and patience. Sarah often watched them together, her heart swelling with happiness. The kindness she had received years ago had returned to her life in ways she had never imagined. One sunny afternoon, the three of them decided to visit the grocery store, the same store where their story had begun so many years ago. Sarah walked in with Michael and Ethan. The air was filled with the familiar scent of bread and fresh produce. They approached the counter, and a young cashier greeted them cheerfully. As they paid for their groceries, Sarah paused for a moment. She looked at Michael and Ethan, smiling. "Do you remember this place?" she asked. Michael chuckled softly. "I remember it very well." Ethan looked curious. "Mom, why do you keep looking so happy?" Sarah knelt down beside him. "Because, Ethan, this is where it all started. Where someone showed me kindness when I had nothing. And now, we are living proof that kindness always comes back." Back at home, the three of them decided to start something new. They wanted to give back to their community, just like the stranger had done for Sarah. They organized food drives, helped families struggling with bills, and volunteered at shelters, spreading kindness in every small way they could. Michael, once alone and forgotten, now had purpose again. He worked alongside Sarah, teaching Ethan the importance of helping others, just as he had taught her so many years ago. And in every act of kindness, Sarah remembered that snowy night when a stranger had stepped in and changed her life. One quiet evening, Sarah sat by the window, watching the sun rise over Willow Creek. Ethan was playing in the yard with Michael, laughing as they tossed a ball back and forth. Sarah held a cup of tea, smiling softly. She whispered to herself, "Thank you, for everything." She thought about how far they had come from that difficult night when she had nothing, to the warmth of this home filled with laughter, care, and love. She realized that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about connecting, sharing, and helping each other through the storms. Michael joined her at the window, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "You kept your promise," he said softly. Sarah smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You changed my life first. I'm just returning it now." Michael chuckled. "I guess kindness really does come back, doesn't it?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, in ways bigger than we could ever imagine." They sat together in silence for a moment, watching Ethan run through the yard, his laughter echoing in the crisp morning air. For the first time in years, everything felt complete. Later that day, Sarah wrote a note and placed it in a small box on the shelf, a new box for new memories. Inside, she placed the grocery receipt from the first day Michael helped her. A photograph of her, Ethan, and Michael smiling together. A small note that read, "Kindness always comes back. Pay it forward." It was a reminder not just for herself, but for Ethan, and for everyone who would hear their story. Final narration line, for YouTube. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can echo for years. It may seem small in the moment, but one day, it may change a life and return to you in ways bigger than you could ever imagine. Sarah, Michael, and Ethan learned that love and kindness always find their way home.